everyone, welcome back to Glue La La. If you are new here, my name is Jess. Last week I decided to step out of my farmhouse bubble and I created 3 boho projects, and this week I'm continuing with the same theme, so I have 3 more boho projects for you today. Alright everyone, let's get started. The first project was inspired by this shelf that I found on the Anthropology website. To get started, I'm going to use one of these wall shelves that I found at the Dollar Tree and some of these giant craft sticks. Now the wall shelf is about 3.5 inches wide, so I'm cutting my craft sticks down to the same length, 3.5 inches. And if you've watched my videos before, you know that my favorite way to cut craft sticks is with my paper trimmer, because I always seem to get the straightest cut with those. Next, I decided to double up the craft stick, so I just ran a little bit of hot glue along the length of each craft stick and I just sandwiched one on top of the other. That way it gave it a little bit more texture and it made it just a little bit thicker, so it would be a little bit sturdier when it was hanging. Now to create the hanging part of the shelf, I'm using some of this thinner jute twine from the Dollar Tree. And all I did was I left a little bit of a tail on the one end, probably about 18 inches or so. And I ran my hot glue along the bottom of one of the craft stick bundles. And then I wrapped it around and glued it again. So that way you'll have 2 lengths of the jute on one side of the sticks and just 1 length on the other side. So you can see here, now that I'm on the second stick, I laid the jute over it with some hot glue, then I wrapped it around and put a little bit more hot glue on it again and stuck it in place. And I'll zoom in here in a second so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So you can see I just added a little bit of hot glue and I laid the jute on it, and I left a little bit of gap in between each of the craft sticks and then wrapped the twine around and put it back on top. So that way, like I said, you'll always have 2 lengths of jute on one side of the craft sticks and then you'll just have 1 length on the back side. And it creates kind of like that suspension bridge look that shelf that I showed you in the beginning had. And I used about 17 bundles for my shelf. That was just the length that I thought looked good, but depending on how low you want your, I don't know what to call it, the suspension bridge to hang, you could use more or less bundles. And then once I had all of the bundles put in place on one side, then I went back through and I did the same technique on the opposite side. And then that made it really sturdy too. And it left just the little bit of gap between each one, so it made it nice and flexible whenever I hung it off of the shelf. Now to attach the hanging part to the wall shelf, I took the tails of that jute and I ran just a tiny bit of hot glue on the ends, and then I kind of let it cool for a second and I rolled it in between my fingers. That way it made it a little bit easier to fish through from the bottom of the shelf. Now these shelves already come assembled, like they already had those ropes and everything knotted on the bottom, so I just had to weave my 2 little tails up through each of the holes, and then I just did a double knot on the top, and then after I had that part secured in place, I flipped it over and I added just a little bit of hot glue underneath, and then I tied my knot into the hot glue, so that way it was nice and secure. It had 2 knots on it, on the top and the bottom, and then the bottom had just a little bit of hot glue just to help make it a little bit more sturdy, because that hanging part, you can put things on it, so I wanted to make sure that it could bear some weight. And then I just repeated that on the opposite side as well. Now I think this looks cool the way it is, but I wanted to decorate it up just a little bit more, so I took one of these neat little throw rugs that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and I decided just to cut the fringy trim end of it off. And both of the sides have a rolled seam on them, so I ended up actually cutting 1 bundle of fringe off of each end. That way it took care of that bulky part, and then I was able to just hot glue it along the front of my shelf, and then I went back through and all those little straggly strings that are sticking up, I trimmed those off just to make it look a little bit cleaner. I love how this shelf turned out, and I could see using this maybe in a bathroom too. You could roll up some washcloths and put it on the hanging part. I mentioned earlier that I like to use my paper trimmer to cut the craft sticks, and I always have that and my other tools linked in the description box below. Okay, for the second project, I'm going to use one of these wooden pencil cups that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and these really cool gold kind of sticker feather things. I don't really know what they are. They're like cutouts, but they have sticky pieces of foam on the back of them. But I didn't really care for the gold, so I decided to take 6 of the smaller feathers, and I painted 2 each in the plaster color, the mineral color, and the elephant color by Waverly. And you can see those little sticky foam pieces there. So I took the backing off of the foam and I added just a little bit of hot glue, and I started gluing them around the pencil cup. Now you could paint the pencil cup if you wanted to, but I really liked this one in particular. It had a lot of different wood tones on it, so I just decided to keep it natural. So after I had all my feathers in place, I took some of the thinner jute from the Dollar Tree and I hot glued a piece down behind one of the feathers, and then I wrapped it around 3 times around the top, and I made sure that I got the tips of the feathers underneath the jute every time I wrapped it around. That way it kind of held it in place, and then I repeated that on the bottom as well. I just made sure that the base of the feathers were all tucked under that jute. Then to decorate mine up, I just added in some floral foam and some of the river rocks from the Dollar Tree, and then I added a succulent. So this piece came together very quickly, and it's a great size for on the shelf. It fits really nice on there. And I think it really fits that boho theme too. You'll have to let me know in the comments what you think. I did forget to mention that I had to give each of these feathers 2 coats of the chalk paint. So for the last project, I'm using the other pencil cup that you can find at the Dollar Tree, the one that's a square shape, and I'm using some of this raffia. So the nice thing about this raffia is it already comes bundled together. So I left it how it was already bundled, and I took some of the jute and I tied it around probably about 4 inches down from the end, and then I just started wrapping it around, and I was making sure that I kept it bundled together pretty tightly. And as I was wrapping the jute around, I made sure that it was always wrapped on top of itself, so none of the raffia showed in between the jute. And then I measured it against the cup, and I realized I needed the bundle to be just a little bit longer, so I kept wrapping a little bit. And then I just kind of hot glued the jute into place towards the top. And then I cut the raffia as close as I could towards the bottom of the bundle. That way it kind of made this fun little haystack kind of thing. So then to decorate this cup, I decided to paint it just a little bit. So I took some pretty wide painter's tape and I laid a piece on the bottom, and that's just going to act as a spacer so that when I laid the second piece on top of it, it made it nice and even the whole way around the pencil cup. And this was easy to do because it is a square, so you didn't have to worry about the edges looking funny like whenever you wrap painter's tape around round objects. Then I just took a little bit of white chalk paint and I'm just kind of dry brushing it on either side of the painter's tape. I didn't want a complete opaque coverage. I wanted just a bit of that wood grain to show through after I was done. So once I peeled the tape off, then I had 2 white stripes and 1 wood grain stripe. And then all I had to do was glue each of my bundles in the 4 corners of the pencil cup. And this pencil cup isn't square, it's more rectangle. So I just made sure that when I glued the bundles in, they were both on one side. And then I realized that the tops of these were just a little bit too long, so I decided to trim them down a little bit. And I did go in at different angles to trim them down. That way it didn't look like a blunt cut right across the top. And then to fill this one, I just added in some floral foam, some of these white rocks from the Dollar Tree, and then another succulent. I just took the thicker stem off and I was able to poke that down through the pencil cup. And you can see here, this piece is nice and small too, so it also actually fits on the shelf as well, but I think it looks really cute as a standalone piece also. And just a quick reminder, I am on Instagram, so if you aren't following me on there, go over there and look up Glue La La and you'll find me. I do some fun things in my stories, and every Wednesday I participate in a DIY tour, so if you follow the link in that tour, you'll get to see a lot of other really cool projects from some other really talented creators. Here's a final look at all 3 projects. I think my favorite is probably the first one. I really like how that shelf came out, and I think it's a pretty good dupe for the Anthropologie version. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like these projects, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!